just say hello to people generally first, and I have a little bit of chat. We have Shirley ready to go in Kilkenny, and this is kind of a new one for us all. So we're hoping that we can manage it without too many messes. But if there are glitches, we just tolerate them and we just wait a few minutes and we'll sort them out. It's great, particularly, I think, to have some people joining us who would normally not be able to get to RHSI lectures because of distance and times and winter times and things. So it's particularly good. And, you know, we have 60 people signed up, which is a fantastic number for the evening. And it is a new departure. It's a new departure for the RHSI to join you in your homes. So I hope you're comfy. I hope you have a cup of tea. Better still, even perhaps a glass of wine. If you have a bag of crisps, remember to keep the mute button off, for goodness sake. We don't want the sound of rattling crisps to disturb Shirley's talk. You know, we've had a summer of very cancelled plans. So this is kind of exciting to have something back and happening. And the cancelled plans have been difficult because people have been organising things and trying to get things ready to do for the RHSI. And we've just one by one had to put them to one side. And we've all had plans cancelled, personal plans and family plans cancelled. It has been tough. So it's very nice to be in a position where we're beginning to move forward with new technologies and new ideas and push things into the next phase. And if you know of people who tried to join and found it difficult or couldn't do it, you know, please ask them to try again, or to ring the office for help, or to look for a YouTube help, or ask some friend to help them. Because, you know, once you get into the habit of it, it gets easier. It gets easier. Technology is challenging us all. And the last thing I'd like to say before I introduce Shirley is I want to say a really big thank you to the many active members of the RHSI who have been keeping things going during the summer. I'm not going to name names because I'd be in danger of leaving people out, but I do want to point to the fact that, you know, an awful lot of volunteers have kept gardens clean enough. Committees have kept things going and organised things. The board has worked hard, and, you know, we have been going through a very challenging time, but people have been working hard, and it's great that we have so many people still on board. So thank you for your hard work generally, and a particular thank you and welcome to Orla in the office, who is our new admin and development person in the office. The little bit of housekeeping. Let's just remember the mute button. I've said that a few times. If you have questions or comments, you can make them. You'll see a little tag called what? Chat. Little chat called chat. And you chat to Kathleen Maloney and I'll get it if you want to ask a question, and I'll relay the questions to Shirley at the end on your behalf. So if you have any questions, feel free, pop them in as you go along. Don't worry if you leave the screen for a while, if you go to make a cup or anything, don't worry, just rejoin us when you can. We aim to be going for about an hour, not much over anyway. And if you want to slip away at any stage. So I think I'm done. Shirley Lanigan, who if you don't know her, you should know her. I'm just leaning over because I have props here. Shirley Lanigan has been writing about gardens for two decades plus, and has produced an awful lot of work in journalism. Her background is in journalism and art, so she's very well equipped to look at gardens. She's probably the person who has visited the most Irish gardens, so she would know Irish gardens and Irish gardeners very, very well. And this resulted, of course, in a couple of books. One book being The 100 Best Gardens of Ireland. There's it and me in the same screen. Lovely book. That was some years ago. I just looked online. I think it's out of print, but you'd get a second-hand copy somewhere else, or if there was enough demand, maybe somebody'd print it again. That was a lovely book. And then the second book, which came out about 3 years ago, The Open Gardens of Ireland. That should be in every glove compartment, in every car of every gardener in the country. And it goes through 427 gardens. So along with your RHSI membership and your Partner Gardens brochure, you should have that. And I noted to myself, I took it off the shelf, you can see a receipt in the top of it. And I noted when I saw the receipt that I opened it up and found my own garden in it. So I was rather chuffed to see that. But I thought, how self-interested you are, Philip. You went and marked your own garden with the receipt when you bought the book. I was obviously checking that I was in it. I presume, Shirley, you can answer this in your own time. I presume, Shirley, if there'd been 101 gardens, it would have been a different story as well. The North Wexford garden might have got into that. So listen, you are very welcome. We're delighted to have Shirley, and her garden talk is called From There to Here and From Here to Where, which is leaving a question, and it's gardening in a pandemic. So thank you very much. Now, there may be a little bit of a glitch here while Shirley gets her screen set up with her PowerPoint. She should come through to you now in a minute. That's Shirley there.
Sorry, for some reason, there we go. Now, can you hear me?
We can hear you. I'll mute me in a minute when we get you up and running. We can hear you, you're fine.
Okay, so
now we'd like to see your PowerPoint.
It's really strange. Oh, can you not see it?
No, we're looking at you.
You can't see.
So you need to go to share screen and get the PowerPoint up.
Okay, hold on a sec.
No problem at all. Take your time. It is strange.
There we go. And now, hopefully this is going to do it. Now, can you see me?
We will in a sec now, I'd say. Not yet. Hopefully coming now in a sec. We see you, but we can't see the slides yet.
Now, to me, it looks like you should.
Oh, here we go.
Now.
Here we go. Now we've got it coming up, I'd say.
Yeah.
Blank screen, but it started screen sharing. So there we go. We have you. Okay, I'm going to mute me now. That's me, Kathleen. And off you go, Shirley. Thank you very much indeed.
Now, so you can hear me?
We can hear you perfectly, loud and clear. Loud and clear, Shirley. Perfect. Nice images and nice and clear.
Okay, so anyway, here we go. Good evening, everybody. This has got to be one of the strangest evenings of my life. I am very bad with technology. I can't believe that I've gotten this far. I should say that last year I got the telephone call to go up to Dublin, to go to Wesley, to give a talk to the RHSI. And I can tell you something, you've no idea how delighted and excited I was. I was chuffed and honoured and all of those things. I was terrified too, but like most fools, I was so busy being delighted, I forgot about the fear and I just said yes. And then the world changed. So the day has come when I'm supposed to be giving the talk. The talk that I was going to give was going to be a sort of a tour through how I think gardening has changed over the last 30 odd years. The years in which I've been sort of crisscrossing the country and looking at gardens. And in fact, I should say that my first book came out in 2001. And it came out in the middle of another lockdown crisis, and it was foot and mouth disease. So I'm getting quite used to dealing with lockdowns of different sorts. But anyway, so that was to be my talk, and it was going to be nice and straightforward, not very exciting. And here we are, the day has arrived, and here I am. I'm not in Dublin, I'm not in Wesley, I'm at home. And I'm trying to give that talk that I planned to give you in person through my computer. And there you are at home, watching me trying to figure out how to give that talk through the computer. So look at us. The world is, as a famous Dubliner once said, in a state of chassis. I was going to witter on about the changes in the world of gardening over a quarter of a century or so. Here we are. trying to wrestle with the changes wrought by 6 months battling with COVID-19. I know it's not the only show in town, but I'm not here to address the bigger background rumble of climate change and a horror show of extreme weather and species extinction and all of those things. We know about all of those things. We know they're there. They're humming away in the background, threatening us. As they say, may you live in interesting times. We unfortunately do. Now, given all of that, I didn't think anybody wanted to listen to me wittering on about the differences in people's gardens, from the demise of the conifer bed and the rockery to the rise of pottagers and prairie planting. Because I think many of us right now feel like we are, as it were, gardening on the edge. So you'll forgive me for bringing Hieronymus Bosch into the picture, but it sort of feels a bit like he belongs here with us in some respects, I think. I know it's a bit over the top, but he's, in a way, he's very old, but he's a painter for our times, I think. Anyway, what we should remember is that, and it's good to remember that if you're on the edge, you're on the edge, you're not in the fire. So it's up on the edge, wobbling a bit, but you're not in the fire. And for as long as we're up there on the edge, there's hope, there's optimism, and, you know, let's forge on. So bear with me, please. I'm going to talk about how the changed world and all that chassis I've been wobbling on about have impacted us as gardeners and people. I'm going to talk about how some of us are proceeding and how we should proceed. But first things first, I think I could probably bet good money on the fact that everyone here has access to a garden of some sort, be it their own or somebody else's. I think I could bet the house on that. If I'm wrong, somebody will let me know at the end, and I'll know if I have to move out of my house. So, assuming my bet is safe, I'd like to say that our access to gardens puts us in an immediately much, much happier place than a massive proportion of the population. We only have to think about all of those misfortunates in basement flats and in flats without even a balcony, let alone a window box. And we realise that we are so, so lucky, and we have been so lucky with the lockdowns and all of the miseries that people have been going through. And I think most people would probably agree that that luck puts a bit of an onus on us to moan a bit less. And at least if we are going to moan a little more quietly. And also, where we can, to contribute a little bit more to the gaiety of the nation, if we can. So I want to say that I actually think that that is precisely what a lot of gardeners have been doing. They've been stepping up to the plate, doing their bit, and providing the world with something beautiful and pretty to look at. So can I give you, please, your friends and mine, the fabulous front gardeners. Now, the lockdown nailed most of us into our own gardens, and it mostly put pay to our doing what it is we love doing, apart from working our own gardens, and that is heading out to visit other gardens and nose around other people's work and enjoy other people's work. Many of the gardens that we always visited had to close to the gardens, had to close to the public for a period of time anyway. And while we were all at home working harder, ever harder at our own plots, a lot of those gardens, particularly the ones that on staff that couldn't work and couldn't get to work, grew a bit wilder and got a bit looser and, you know, got behind themselves in much the way that a lot of our gardens often do, I think. But even now, as some of those gardens are open, a lot of us either are not permitted to go and visit because we're back in lockdown, or we're still a bit tentative and a bit scared and would prefer to wait until it's all over and done with before we get back out there in the world and start visiting again. Apart from that is the places that we can visit and see and admire without going in. The gardens that we can walk past and drive past. The gardens that put it all out there in front for us as passers-by to enjoy. I mean, back down in the first lockdown that we went under, when we had the 2K and the 5K limits, put a major halt to the number of front gardens a lot of us were allowed to nose past anyway. Now, I have to say, if I could have chosen a 2K within which to live during the lockdown, I would have chosen to live in Blackrock in Dublin. Those gardens are seriously enviable, and whenever I go to Dublin, I usually find some class of an excuse to either drive through some of the roads in Blackrock or drive and stop and walk through some of the roads in Blackrock, looking through gates and over fences and hedges whenever people have left their hedges low enough to look over. I have always enjoyed it. The gardens are beautiful, and as I say, if I had my choice of lockdown 2K radius, Blackrock would have been it. But I also think there's another area, and that is the little the network of small streets, terraced houses with no gardens near Grand Canal Dock, and those people have done the most magnificent things with their window boxes, and some of them have actually refused to contain themselves within the window box frame and have moved out on the footpath. You see lines of pots and planters with everything from cosmos to cabbage and flowering shrubs and roses, and basically you've got terraced houses with no gardens that actually have gardens now. I love it. It is just the most beautiful sight to see when you step in off one of the streets where you're looking at huge Google, Facebook-y modern office blocks. The next time you've got a chance to walk around Dublin, do go and take a look. It's lovely. It's quite beautiful. So anyway, where am I now? So those people, they do a service for both themselves and their neighbours and the people who decide to walk past them. And I hope that those fabulous front garden heroes, I know how much pleasure they give us. And I think we should, when we can, let them know that we appreciate what they're doing. And maybe some of us might think about joining their ranks. I'll go on about that a bit later. But anyway, this year I've come across some of the most wonderful example of this very civic sort of gardening in my own Kilkenny too. Everywhere I'm coming across enthusiastic gardens where they're putting it all out front, all on show, all of the time. And let me say, I certainly appreciate it. Now, I'm going to present to you, this is the Welly Garden in Innisteag, and it's just one of the most cheerful, lovely sights you could hope to come across. Somebody told me about it a few years ago, and I went down to inspect it. I didn't know what they were talking about, but here you are, look at it. The best possible use you could put broken and worn out walking boots to. And proof that all you need is a bit of a brain and a few packets of annual seeds. And here you have this cheerful, wonderful, silly garden that entertains all the people who walk down this lane on their way to the woods in Innisteag. So that's one part of the garden. Here is another. That's the house that owns it. Isn't it just an absolute delight? The wisteria, and again, the little window boxes there, much more restrained than the Welly Garden, but no less beautiful. Now, this particular gardener, really, I mean, it's medals they should be given. Their main garden is blocked off by that path that the public can walk through, and this is what's on the other side, completely within view. So this garden has, this gardener, I don't know if it's man or woman. One of the days I'm going to knock on the door and go in and find out and thank them and congratulate them. But they're so wonderful. They've donated the whole of their garden really to the public, and they should be thanked. They should be thanked. I will move along. Now, this is Pat Murphy's garden in Johnstown in North Kilkenny. It's on a back road out of the little village of Johnstown. And I've been passing it for years. It's just wonderful. Where the other garden is all flowers and blooming and a real summer delight, this is all year round, an all year round topiary garden that is completely all on show all of the time to the people driving past and, like me, stopping as they drive past. That's garden. One day I actually got out of the car and went up and knocked on the door, and I was so pleased I did. He is the most charming, charming man. And he gave me the whole story. He started in the little cottage with his mum and dad when he was small. They gave him the front garden to play with, and he started planting pots of lines of marigolds and the usual sort of bedding, just a little bit of a flower garden. And as he said, he got sick of it after a few years. The amount of work he felt he had to put into creating a flower garden, just, it was irritating. And he was a farmer and he had better things to be doing with his time. So he said he was going to plant some shrubs. So he planted shrubs. And as they got big and started bumping into each other, he started clipping them. And after about 40 years of work, this is what he has. He's trimming and clipping and preening them all year round. And as he said, once a year in the summer, when he's got it looking absolutely right, he climbs up on the roof, takes a photograph of it, and that's it for the year. It's the most cheerful, lovely garden. And what I also love about it is that it's bleeding out into the neighbouring fields, both on either side of it and across the road. So about a few hundred yards before you get to his garden, you already begin to see tidied, smartened, neatened hedges, and it leads up to him and then slowly drifts away as you drive off. He's taking over the whole road slowly, and it's a beautiful sight. I have one or two more photos here of it for you. They're just, the colours are wonderful for an evergreen garden. And this is just, his garden ends there, and there's a field here, and I think there were cows grazing in it, but he's even worked the topiary in over the side of the hedge leading into the field next door. I loved that little touch. Now, okay, so we go from the delight that is Pat's all year round garden back into the people who give us a treat in the summer. And this is a series of photographs of the gorgeous village Ardmore down in West Waterford. And a lot of you who have been down and have done the wonderful looped walk up above the village and around the coast will have passed this line of cottages. They're straight out onto the road. They basically have about a metre width of space in front of each cottage. And I was always told by good garden designers that you should never, ever, ever, if you can help it, have a border, less than a metre deep, because there's just not enough depth. But look at that. I mean, these are little lawbreakers, and they break that law beautifully. They're gorgeous gardens. So a slightly more restrained one here. And just a close-up detail. Some of them also have secondary gardens on the other side of the road, falling down the cliff and towards the water. And they're just nice, and all the way through the summer, really cheerful and beautiful, a real tribute to both themselves and the village. And in fact, if you do the looped walk, I've just had something say my internet connection is unstable. Can you still hear me? Anybody? Yeah, okay. So anyway, if anybody does the looped walk in Ardmore, you'll have walked up past these, you'll do the beautiful around the headland walk, you come back down into and there are some really lovely larger old gardens as well that you'll pass as you come back down to the harbour. So basically Ardmore is a gardener's treat all around, and then at the bottom of the hill in the harbour is a great ice cream shop, so you can treat yourself to an ice cream when you finish your walk. Now this is one of my favourite gardens in the country. And basically every spring, the potted ground on the edge of the road from Dunedin to Kill basically takes out its loudhailer and just announces itself to the traffic and flourishes and flowers away there for about a month in the late spring. It's simple, it's obretia, it's some spring bulbs, and it's a whitewashed wall, and then that lovely shed with the red painted gates and doors behind it. Now, I missed it this year because it was flowering at the time that I was at lockdown. I wasn't allowed out of Kilkenny, and boy, did I miss it. So I had to satisfy myself with the picture here. So I'm looking forward and really hoping that next year I'll be able to see that beautiful site again. And the same thing happened for the road between Bunmahon and Anstown, again in Waterford. It's like a natural rockery. It's on one side you've got the sea and it's glorious, but on the other side you have what originally would have been an old stone wall that has become quite congested with grass at the bottom, but at the top, in the late spring and early summer, it's just an explosion of things like sea thrift and sedum and rock rose, and it is glorious. And it has the, as well as being beautiful, it has the great ability to slow traffic down on a road which is windy and dangerous and really needs to have its traffic slowed. So as well as being beautiful, it's also a really good aid to keeping the traffic safe. It's the road, as I said, again, from Bunmahon to Anstown. Make of a note of it and try to drive along it one summer, maybe next summer, if early next summer, if we're all back in the world again, I hope. Now, it's not quite a garden, but I find it difficult not to include these three men. Again, I see them every year. It's their little potato field and it's on the side of the road. So again, it's in full view. And whenever you drive or walk up the hill that it sides, when they're doing their dig, you get a chance to chat to them, and they're so pleasant. And basically this is their potato field. They dig it, they sow the spuds, and then basically they live off the spuds until next year when they come out and do the same thing. Again, I missed it this year. I was very sad to miss it, but again, I hope next year I will get a chance to see them at work and have another chat with them again. Great expectations, I suppose I could call that. Now, and this is just one of my favorite pictures ever of one of my favorite sites, and I think it's another chance to prove that the private donor to the public good need not break either bank or back in order to produce a stunner. This is Hare Island down off Baltimore, showing what a sense of style and a willingness to share can deliver. One gladiolus flower, some grasses, and an incredible shade on that cottage. You could live, if you had nothing else to look at but that, I think you could live and be happy. I love it. And I did knock on the door to congratulate the person, but there was nobody at home at the time. Again, eventually when I get down to Hare Island, I might get a chance to do that. Here we go. Now, another one. No garden to speak of, but it hasn't stopped the person here. I think it's somewhere over in Roscommon. It hasn't stopped them from being creative. And I think this is equally important, providing a bit of a habitat for some wildlife on what is otherwise a very barren, plain place. It's quite lovely. It's a bit of style, I think. Now, I should say that before I show the next slide, those of you with sensible dispositions might wish to look away. Now, where would we be without the jokers? these lads, they rule, I think, a particular front garden on the edge of Tramore. And really, they're another traffic slowing down mechanism, I think, providing passing children of all ages with something to smile at. I absolutely love them. And they, every year you see, some of them have been given a nice lick of paint, so they're always up to date. They never fade. They're always looking sparkling and fun, and another roadside treat, I think. Now, back to some proper gardening, I think. Quite often, the private public garden is a bit off the track, and this is one in Mayo. Now, I have to say, it's got to be one of the finest treats in life to walk down the grass in the middle road that Marty McElgan's garden bounds. And anyone prone to envy should sort of brace themselves when I tell them that the weeds on the verge outside his stone wall are orchids, purple orchids. Basically, the verge is infested with them. If you could infest something with something as beautiful as orchids, it's quite glorious outside the gate, and as you can see, inside is just as beautiful. And the orchids crop up all over the place in the garden too. I have to say, I think if God exists and if he has a garden, this might be it. It's so gently worked. The flowers they're all for the bees, they're all for the pollinators. It's loose, it's relaxed, and it's just utterly at home in the Mayo Hills, where it is just so gently nestling. I love this garden beyond all. I really, really do. And he's a wonderful gardener. I have more slides of it for later. Now, this is another Mayo garden, and another example of just the generosity of people, some people with their gardens. This is the garden of Graham and Daphne Guthrie, and their garden borders the Westport Greenway. And as I noted, instead of hedging it or fencing it in, they put the whole thing on show. And the marching hordes march past and constantly stop them and ask questions and make comments. And this very obliging couple answer all the questions. And they spent an enormous amount of their time, I think, answering those questions. They should be given the title, I think, of Greenway ambassadors and given some sort of a medal. And I do like the fact that they can keep socially distanced by that pond down at the bottom. And they told me that the pond came about, they had a damp spot at the bottom. They couldn't dry it out. And so they encouraged it, they banked it up, and this is what they ended up with. It's beautiful. Anyway, it prevents the people on the Greenway crossing over and getting too close. So they have the beautiful view, but and they have the kind Guthries to answer questions, but they can't actually get into the garden. But I really think to give your garden over like that is really, it's above and beyond the call, I think. Now, another slightly out of the way, beautiful all to the front garden is if you were walking along a back road at Care Bridge in the Burren, you would come across a part of this garden, a generous section of the garden of Carl Wright. Out to the road, you'll walk past a lovely old stone wall, a beautiful bridged stream, and you can see a large area, the water garden area of Carl's garden, as well as some of the amazing stone walls he's built. Carl's is just the most wonderful Burren garden. It's quite a delight. And I'm cheating a bit though when I show this photograph, because the photograph is of an ash tree sort of clambering its roots down around the rocks to get at the water. It's inside the garden, and so you can only see it when you actually go inside to visit it, but the sight from the road is pretty magnificent as well. Now, another very generous roadside gardener. This is from Annabelle Langrish's garden down in Ahakista in Cork. And Annabelle, you can visit the garden, but you can also see quite a lot of her very quirky sculptural work from the road, including this. It's just beautiful. It's a tree draped in old boys of different sorts, and you see it from a distance, and it's just, it's lovely, it's quirky, it's beautiful. But the most recent exhibit, I should say, of hers was the last time I was there, she was repurposing. She had bought at great expense an old fishing boat that had a hole in it, so it was no longer seaworthy. But she bought it and she'd set it up on the road opposite her garden. She was getting ready. She was going to create a set of steps up to it, surround it with flowers, and basically you could climb up and you could sit in the boat surrounded by a sea of flowers. And as I say, again, it's out on the road, you can't miss it, impossible to miss. And another very stylish and generous act of gardening. Now, I'm going to include another picture from Annabelle's garden, and that is of a sleeper into which she embeds the dead tools, the tools that have worked themselves to death in her garden. And I just love it. It's a wonderfully quirky piece of sculpture, and fairly indicative of the sort of work that you see around her garden if you go in to visit. Now, back over in Waterford, again, we're back in Tramore, and this is one of several really lovely public, or rather visible to the public, private gardens along the Doneraile walk in Tramore that leads down to what some people will know as a very famous swimming spot, the Gillimane swimming spot. But the Doneraile walk, anyway, it walks along under a lot of people's gardens, and as it proceeds, it finds itself walking over some people's gardens, and it really is, for nosy garden lovers, there are some really nice sites, and this is one of them. It's quite beautiful. And this, I love the fact that it's by the sea, you've got a view of the sea behind it, and it really has a feel of the sea, the ropes and a lot of the nice seaside planting. It's a real beauty now. Now, hold on. Now, this is a completely different prospect. This is Turner's Cross in Cork, and I first came across this when I was stuck in traffic, and I can tell you, I was very glad to find myself stuck in traffic, and I didn't mind that the traffic wasn't moving at all, because this is just one of the maddest gardens. It is great. Part of it makes you feel like you're in New Orleans, and you expect to see somebody reclining up on the balcony with a mint julep in their hand. It's just wonderful. I stopped the car when I could, and I went back to take a look at it, and it's just a knot of plants. The whole house is being slowly entwined in everything from honeysuckle and roses to wisteria, and there are pots and containers and things dug into the path and dug into the ground. And it's a wonderful, wild, wacky garden. I would like to have knocked on the door, but I couldn't find the door. I'll go back someday and have another look at it, but I have to say it made being stuck in a traffic jam a real pleasure. If we had more of these on our busier roadways, I think there's quite a lot of us who wouldn't mind a traffic snarl in the morning or the evening. And now this, I was driving down a back lane somewhere in North Cork. I can't remember where it was. And I came across this, and I just had to stop the car because it's bonkers. It's wonderful. I mean, it's just so silly. And the amount of work that whoever owns it goes into several times a year, I would say, in order to keep it like that. I mean, these are the sort of things that make us just love gardening. I mean, there is a slight insanity there, and it's wonderful. It really is. I love it. Now, okay, so far what I've been showing are photos of private people's gardens, but it's not just the individual gardeners that we should thank for giving us, as we walk past and drive past, something wonderful to look at. There are some communities that should be given a major clap, and my first prize always goes to Clonegall in County Carlow. Clonegall is just it's a beautiful little village. You know, it's got a lot. It's got a wonderful, winding, well-maintained road that leads to it. You cross over the bridge. You've got the River Slaney. It is really lovely. But what I love about what the people of Clonegall have done is that they've actually turned the whole village into, it's almost like a deconstructed herbaceous border. And it stretches in sections along the length of the village on both sides. And you'll have different parts of what feel like the herbaceous border here, and dotted across there and down here, and in front of somebody's house, and in the lane between two other houses. And it's really beautiful. What you end up really is just this lovely promenade, the length of the village, shared by everybody and worked, I think, by the community largely as well. There is also a little Weaver's Cottage museum, and behind that they have a productive community garden. But this is, as I say, you can socially isolate yourself and march along and enjoy it to your heart's content. It's just wonderful. And it's about as unmunicipal a municipal planting as you could possibly hope to come across. And I think that it would be a really good place for a lot of town committees who are organising themselves for tidy towns to visit, because it's just, there's an ease and a loose loveliness about it that is very hard to get when you're planting, you know, for a community. It's quite beautiful. Sorry, I go back. Now, this is a field outside Ballin, also in Carlow. Now, Ballin, first of all, I said about Clonegall, it has a lot of natural features that make it easier for Clonegall to be a beautiful garden village. Ballin doesn't have the same advantages, because basically it's a sort of a rat run for traffic. Yet, even with that, and even with the constant run of serious traffic through the village, they've turned it into a gorgeous flower-filled place. The school is on the main road, and the school garden is out in front of it on the main road and stretching up the road on either side. And outside everybody's house and on everybody's window is a planter or a pot, and the place is just filled with flowers. They've made great use of a difficult traffic space. And then outside the village is this wonderful field that, designed by nature, the Sandro Cafolo's seed company borrows or rents or uses, I don't know what, to grow seeds for poppies and cornflowers and things. That's just glorious. And it's what you imagine, you know, fields might have been 100 years ago, and maybe might be again if things go in a certain direction. Now, staying on the planting for the public. Oh, before I go on, I would also like to mention, I haven't got a photograph, but Lachlan Bridge in Carlow is a garden village to all intents and purposes. It has a beautiful riverside garden that doubles up as a sort of a memorial to famous people from Carlow. And there's another interesting one devoted to Vivaldi. There are community gardens, and basically they have just such an amount of window box action. They have a sort of a window box habit and a hanging basket habit in Lachlan Bridge that would impress anybody. So that's Carlow, and I'd say possibly part of the reason is the fact that Carlow has that great garden festival, and it might be just the influence of it over the years has pulled along the gardens in such an impressive way. So anyway, but this is not Carlow. We're moving here. This is over to Mullaghmore, and the community in Mullaghmore, and you know, so ravaged by the Mountbatten murders back in 1979, they built a peace park, and it's one of the most beautiful, floriferous gardens, public gardens I can possibly imagine. It's so lovely, and it is so peaceful. It's a wonderful thing to have done in such awful circumstances. And there's also attached to it a community garden. Sort of, you have to go and hunt for it, but it's very higgledy-piggledy and it's nice. But this is their decorative, really very, very beautiful peace garden. Now, talking about quirky public gardens, down in Doolin, the Pier Garden in Doolin, designed by the late, great, lamented Matthew O'Connell, a wonderful gardener. And he told me about this, and I was trying to describe what it was they were doing, and it didn't make a great deal of sense. And I didn't get to see it the first time Matthew was talking to me about it. As I say, they were still in the middle of working on it. And when I did finally get to see it, it just knocked the socks off me. It's really quirky, and it's a brilliant garden for a community because there are very few plants in it, and what plants there are like, a lot of them are self-sown and they're seaside plants, and it's as much to do with flotsam and jetsam and bits and pieces of debris from the seaside. And then you have things like this, crocheted coats for stones, and it's so sweet, it's so lovely, and it's sort of a charming little feature that took up a space that was really nothing, a dead space down by the pier, before Matthew and his pals in the community got together and created it. It's a credit to them, and it will always remind me of him. He was a wonderful gardener who indeed opened his own garden, and as you say, entry to the garden is free, donation to the Doolin Coast Guard are welcome, and a bird bath at the end of the garden. So I think, I don't think that was for the people. That was, it was his garden was really beautiful, full of fabulous seaside plants and gorgeous, very unusual sculptural works. So anyway, back to Dublin, and this is really sort of, this is almost first place in the you don't need too much to impress category, and this is Chancery House beside the forecourts. I walked past this place for decades, and while I noticed the building and loved it, I don't ever remember any garden. And then suddenly I was walking past and I saw this, and it was just beautiful. And at the bottom, sort of where I'm facing the garden, is an equally beautifully designed shed. Shed is not good enough a word, but it is a shed. And there was a worker in there, so I knocked on the window. He was having a cup of tea and reading newspaper. So I knocked on the window and I asked him, I said, how long? Tell me, please, why have I not been seeing this? Have I been blind all these years walking past it? And he explained to me that actually, while the garden had always been there, it was completely overgrown, so much that, you know, when something is so overgrown, you walk past, you don't see it. And a few years previously, I decided to take it. This one is and it's just so lovely. There's a little fountain and there's a bench, so it's for the people who live in the flats and also for the passers-by. And I think it's also a really lovely tribute to Herb Sims, the man who designed wonderful set of flats. Generously presented front gardens have been a saviour to many of us over the past few really rotten months, and I think we should thank the kind gardeners and the people who mind them, both private and municipal. And as I already mentioned, maybe we might think of joining them. So now you're going to forgive me if I take a little detour and go back to something silly for a minute. And I would just want to say that Bang March, when the world fell off the cliff, a lot of people moved into jammy mode, and we got out of the bed, but we weren't really smartening up the act because nobody could see us. And I think this was a terrible mistake for many reasons. I mean, first of all, remember Flanagan and his Zoom underpants moment, you know. I felt so sorry for the poor man. But if he had been smartening himself up, it wouldn't have happened. So I think when we have to be locked down, we should dress up. And I have two looks that I will be showing this evening in this short fashion show in between my slightly more serious points. And this one is the more aristocratic among you, and it is one Lady Burleigh. And that hat is brilliant, and it's basically proof that hard work need not be done in rags. She was very famous for her sartorial elegance in the garden, and you see she's chopping away and looking glorious. So that is for, as I say, the more aristocratic among you. Those more left field people might take a bit of inspiration from this little punky girl. And she's nailed to a post in the, Our Lady's Hospice in Harrods Cross. But I just love the attitude of her. She's got her mean little skirt on there. She's going out to the big one. I think in a weird sort of world that we're in at the moment, a bit of grooming is useful. Putting on something nice in the way of clothing to do the gardening does help. I haven't a clue why, and it doesn't matter, but it helps. And anyway, where else have we got to wear our lovely clothes? So I'm not telling you that you should, you know, wear your green silk gown, cocktail gown out to do the garden, but we may as well look our best. So anyway, that's the detour. Right, I'm going to, my last few points really are about, you know, how we got on, many of us. For a few months, really, the world went very quiet. The skies cleared of plains, and there are white trails everywhere. And it was remarkable that we had such a beautiful spring and a beautiful early summer. And so we had these blue skies without trails, and it was just so strange, to the point that when I see a trail now, I'm sort of wondering, where are they going? What's that thing doing up there? It's quite strange. That's me anyway, but it was one of the more wonderful, strange things. The background hum of traffic that we had gotten so used to the extent that most of us didn't hear it anymore, was turned down and turned off in places. And we noticed it. Everybody was talking to each other about it. We began to hear nature, even in towns, even in cities. I have friends who live on the edge of Mount Street, and I was getting weekly bulletins about the fox that was marching up and down the road outside, and the wars that were happening between the foxes and the seagulls. And basically, these are people who they just don't notice nature, and they were noticing it, and it was a terrible time, but this was one lovely thing in that terrible time. So as I say, we began to hear nature. Quiet was unsettling, definitely, but it was also beautiful. We heard birds. We listened to the silence and the sounds of nature, and we were absolutely mesmerized by it. As I say, people who never paid any attention to it began to talk about things like the dawn chorus. I don't know how many people spoke to me about the dawn chorus this year. And I could count the number on one hand that would have spoken to me about it in previous years. We just became fascinated with bees and nature. Nature in general, actually, it enjoyed that temporary respite. Now, it might have been temporary, but I think it will have been of some small help to nature under siege and under pressure. And so I'm wondering, is it possible that as a result of all of this enforced nature watching that many of us underwent, that more of us are maybe beginning to think about nature and gardening a little bit more responsibly, and with nature a little bit more in mind? We have no weddings to go to. We have no gigs, and the fun has been taken out of shopping because you can't try on anything on, so there's no point in going shopping. So we have had so much more time to garden, and with so much time we have more time to hand weed rather than spray, and to pick off the bugs rather than drown them, along with so many beneficial bugs in chemical baths. So here we are. And once again, I'm going to bring you back to Marty McElgan's garden. These are his beehives. His whole garden is given over to beehives. And I saw one of the most wonderful sights ever, and it was a swarm settled on a stump, trying to decide where it was going to go. And I was studying it. I didn't realize what I was looking at because I have very bad eyesight, and I could only see it looked like a fuzz on the stump, and I couldn't quite figure it out. And he came behind me and he explained, it's a swarm of bees. They're getting ready to decide what direction to go to find a new hive. And he explained that they'll be there for about 24 hours and they send out scouts to find another location before they leave. And it was, I have to say, it was heart-stoppingly wonderful. But anyway, there are Marty's beehives. And that's another shot of his garden. I mean, just look at it. And as I say, there are a few places in the world that really deserve to be in the glorious location that they're in. And Marty and his garden deserve to be where they are, in the lovely hills of Mayo there behind him. It's a wonderful, wonderful garden. So his really is a reminder of, you know, how good a lightly tended garden can be. And this is just one shot taken from, it's just a gatepost in somewhere in County Clare. And it's just a wonderful, for me, just a wonderful example of a whole garden in one tiny area that just appeared of its own accord. You've got the cotoneaster, the wood slowly rotting down, and the moss, and really, if you had nothing else to look at, you would be quite happy. So, now forgive this. What about all of this extra time on our hands? I know that's a terrible sort of a ouchy pun, but with all that extra time on our hands and all those extra hours, we and the makers of all those gardens that we used to visit have had this extra time to put into our gardens. So what will await us when we finally get back out into the world and we can finally get back to something like the old world and begin visiting other gardens, other people's gardens properly, and not just looking over the gate? What sort of changes are we going to find? Will we find that they have gone to even more trouble to produce high maintenance gardens like this, or this? I love this. And this one, I absolutely adore. I think the golf balls and the eyes are fabulous, but it's, you know, the high maintenance-y sort of thing. Are we going to have more of that? Now, I put this in here for one reason and one reason alone, and it's to congratulate and honor Sam Bennett and his Tour de France win. I know they're not on bikes, they're on horses, but they're riding, and it'll do me. So who knows what things are going to be like when we go back, when we finally emerge up from out of the COVID-19 bomb crater that we're living in at the moment, and get a chance once again to see inside other people's gardens. Only then will we get the chance to see just what everyone has been up to in their back gardens as well as their front gardens. So gazing in the sun like these little dotes, or this big mama, I look forward to finding out myself. And in the meantime, keep safe, wash your hands, and happy gardening at home. Thank you.
Unmute. I think I'm audible now. Am I audible to you, Shirley?
Yes.
Great. Now, I have a question here from Mary Hickey. who would like to know, what is Shirley's favourite garden? Very unfair question, but I'd like to know too.
What's my favourite?
What's your favourite garden? Perhaps we could rephrase and say, what's your favourite style of garden, perhaps?
Oh, the Marty McElgan's wild garden.
The wild garden. Fair enough. Yeah, I'm with you. Paula Dunn is saying to everybody, hello and thank you for a very enjoyable talk. I see coming through. Another question here we have is, have you come across gardens where people are growing food in the front garden? Or are, and honesty boxes? Is there, are people trading plants or selling apples or honesty boxes in front gardens? I've seen a few. Have you seen many?
Yes, well, I know the two most famous that I can think of are in Cappoquin House and Doreen Garden, and they've always operated them and always found them to be very successful, and I always think it's really lovely. But there's one near me now, and it's a lovely garden. It's a beautiful place, actually. It's called Talbot's Inch, and it's a sort of an arts and craft village on the edge of Kilkenny. And there's one lady there, and she keeps chickens, and she grows vegetables and lovely flowers, and she's made the most beautiful box that she has out at her front gate, and whatever it is that she's got, be it eggs or flowers or vegetables, she puts into the box and lets people pay as and when they wish. And it's, I have to say, every time I go past, it's always cleared out. So she's got a lot of very, very loyal customers. It's a lovely site, it really is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll just check the chat and see if there are any more questions. I see two. No, just some very positive comments about the chat, about your talk there, Shirley. That's lovely to see. I suppose I'll just round things off. Perhaps that was terrific. And for me, I'm kind of lightheaded with relief that Zoom has worked and we have 57 people joining us, which was really fantastic. And thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Shirley. I mean, I think many of us remember the Gnome Garden in Rathfarnham. I remember driving past it in my youth, loved it. And I remember seeing a photograph of it recently enough. I think Dermot Gavin showed it or something, and it was lovely to see it again. I loved the eclectic nature of your observations, from the sublime to the ridiculous. Another thank you has just flicked up there from Karen Robinson, thank you. And from Peter White saying thank you very much. This is a great way to connect with people.